Pronouns, rainbow flags and gender identity are on the agenda for Schools Diversity Week from Monday. Around 6,000 schools across the UK have signed up for the event run by the LGBT plus charity Just Like Us to educate Key Stage 2 children as young as 7, reportedly encouraging them to wave rainbow flags and don pronoun badges proclaiming whether they identify as male, female or non-binary. Concerns have been raised by some about the idea of indoctrinating children with gender ideology without the knowledge or consent of their parents. One such person is my next guest, Steve Beegoo, the Head of Education at Christian Concern. Steve, thank you for joining us again. What are your primary concerns about this curriculum that's been pushed into Key Stage 2?
Yeah, well, Just Like Us are one of scores of organisations that are pouring their resources into schools up and down the country, and yes, even primary schools. One of the things that's so fascinating about the scale of all of this is that speed at which this has started to come into schools, and the breadth and the scope of the curriculum that the LGBT and gender ideology is being integrated with. So 6,000 schools, Just Like Us, are saying that they're working with to provide diversity weeks next week. I mean, I don't think it should be called a diversity week. It should really be called Gender Ideology Orthodoxy Week. Really, the way in which they enforce and encourage and direct the teachers and therefore the children to wear badges, to think about pronouns in English lessons in Key Stage 2, to study all sorts of queer role models and to see examples of queer theory, essentially, and trying to, it's a kind of a grooming thing, I see it as, is to kind of gently persuade them in this direction from a young age so that they're ready to embrace all the LGBT ideology at the first moment they get an opportunity to.
Well, I've had a look at this curriculum and they've managed to squeeze the LGBTQ plus stuff into every subject. So I used to teach computer science. I had a look at the computer science stuff. I'm like, how on earth are they going to teach about LGBTQ plus in computing, where we're teaching programs and algorithms? But they found a way, and it's in everything. Steve, my concern is that in subjects like RE, they're teaching lessons on gay Muslims, bisexual Jews, and non-binary lesbian Christians, all of which are what those faiths would call abhorrent or against the order of God, but they're teaching them as if they're orthodoxy within those faiths. Now, that's manipulating faith, is it not?
It's exactly that, and I couldn't agree more that it is a manipulation and it's a misleading of children. And Just Like Us, the examples that I've seen are specifically to target faith-based families, specifically to target faith schools, because in their own research that they highlight themselves, they see that it is a barrier having faith to respond and embrace the LGBT and gender ideology. So therefore, they need to work harder to make sure that children and families from those kinds of groups, from those kinds of schools, are better educated in this kind of way. And so there is a consistent misleading of children from the things that I've seen to encourage them to embrace multiple genders, to embrace multiple possibilities of a whole variety of forms of sexuality, and persuading them by having role models who are Jewish, who are Muslim, who are Christian, who are from a liberal end of those religious faiths, having those guys, young, 18, attractive, persuading these children, do you know what, you can embrace this, you can embrace these ideas, you can embrace the possibility that you might have been born in the wrong body. And Just Like Us will be signposting children and young people to those religious organisations, which most of those organisations are very much at a certain end of the spectrum, not aligning with the traditional beliefs that Christians would have, Muslims would have had, Jews would have, those from a traditional Abrahamic faith that says that God creates people male and female and that heterosexual marriage is the way in which sexual expression should happen.
Yeah, Steve, they're indoctrinating children, they're grooming them to replace their faith with the new faith of woke. I think it's disgusting, but I'm thankful that you are standing up against it. Anything I can do to support you, let me know. That is Steve Beegoo, Head of Education at Christian Concern. Thank you for your time today. I want to briefly bring my panel in. Emma, this is just toxic.
Completely. I mean, these are totally contested ideas. It's ideology. This is critical pedagogy. They are essentially, and I don't mean this organisation specifically, I think we're seeing many, many examples of this, indoctrinating children into a particular worldview. This is not what education is for. This is not teaching children their ABCs and the basics and teaching them to think for themselves. This is teaching them to think in a particular way, and that is indoctrination.
I'm with you. Shara, should 7-year-olds be learning about gender pronouns and putting badges to say they're non-binary, waving rainbow flags?
I think there are some preconditions that have to be met before anything like that happens, which are not happening. There was a great report, actually, just a couple of months, launched, Policy Exchange, Asleep at the Wheel, which did an assessment of the fact that increasingly we've got non-government organisations, charities so-called, coming into our schools. That reduces quality. Even the Green Party's own education policy makes it very clear that it should be local authorities assessing quality. That's not happening. The fact that you've got a subset of schools doing this, that should raise some alarm bells about quality. Secondly, parental consent. Really important, vital, also part of Green Party education policy. They should be front and centre of what's going on in the schools. The fact that you have some of these syllabuses secret.
Yes.
Alarm bells.
Schools.
So, you know, big discussion to be had about the appropriateness, age appropriateness when these come in. I'm not a great fan of queer theory as such. I think that's a highly contested theory. It shouldn't be promulgated. It is a political promulgation if it's presented as fact.
Right. And schools should be working with parents, not against parents. Thank you both. That was Emma Webb and former Deputy Leader of the Green Party, Shara Ali.